Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss Reform UK's plans for the Welsh and Scottish elections in 2026. Their Project 2026, as I'll be calling it. Despite the fact that people think, Reform UK, they're this Little Englander nationalist party, which their main players essentially are, they do have enough support in Scotland and Wales to raise their profile quite a bit, make them seem that momentum's going their way, that this party on the build, and then get ready for the general election in Westminster in a few years' time. But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So you may be thinking, oh no, we're going to be discussing how Trump's going to affect things from another angle now. And it's like, no, actually, the orange one, if anything, derailed my plans here because I was going to discuss this video last week. And that being said, this is certainly another feature of British politics that's over the next few years absolutely going to have the outcome influenced by Trump in one way or another. It could be good, could be bad. It's hard to actually think of anything at the moment that's not going to be influenced by Trump. I mean, you could think there could be a silver lining here that maybe in a couple of years' time, Trump and Putin will be both so deeply unpopular in the UK, even amongst a lot of voters that Reform UK is chasing after, that Farage struggles because of his explicit support for both of them. Or maybe not. Maybe Farage will still be riding the crest of the orange wave. Can't really tell at this point. What we can say is that Reform UK are aiming to be a significant force in both Holyrood and the Senedd after the 2026 elections. So we'll look at Scotland first. Although they may expect to make their biggest splash in Wales. But Scotland, there's a few little interesting wrinkles here. So, might sound odd. Reform's main platform is one of anti-immigration. And Scotland is generally agreed, not least by the people of Scotland, to be badly in need of a population boost. We're full doesn't really work for Scotland because it's almost completely empty. Some constituencies are absolutely massive because there's only like 3 sheep live there. But Reform UK don't need to win huge numbers of votes. They just need to displace the Conservatives as the main party of dickheads, and where Scotland doesn't really vote overwhelmingly for any one party these days, whoever comes top of the pile is going to need support in order to govern. In fact, Reform's stated aim is to become kingmakers. Now, I'm not going to argue that this is what's going to happen. No, it's not directly. But they may introduce an interesting indirect kingmaker effect. So the way Reform did in the Westminster elections in Scotland this summer, with polling for Holyrood, Professor John Curtis has already said that they could win quite a few seats in Holyrood. But consider that Reform UK are trying to professionalise their operation for the next general election. So don't imagine that Reform UK in 2026 are going to be like the Reform UK of this year. They are actually working on Scotland-specific policies to push for 2026. And they're making sure they know what the local issues in their target areas are. They are actually professionalising. So they're not, you're thinking to yourself, they're just going to blather on about boats and hotels. No, they're not. They're actively working on campaign lines designed to appeal to the sort of voters they can realistically target. And for those who insist it won't work, we know it will work. Not just from the recent evidence from across the Atlantic, but even votes in the UK. Scotland, of course, voted, quite strongly against Brexit, but 40% still voted for it. Farage doesn't need anywhere near that share of the votes to meet his aims in 2026. But we've seen, even in Scotland, you can get a significant amount of the vote backing populist policies. Of course, Reform do split the potential vote a bit in Scotland because it comes to devolution, for example. Reform UK campaign against it. Now, there are voters in Scotland who are also against devolution, but it's only a minority who feel the same way. But it is still enough to allow Reform UK to become a big player in the Scottish Parliament if things go their way. By 2026, Reform UK could be better organised, better prepared, more focused than ever before. Now, obviously, there are still things that could hold the tide back. Labour's policies may be starting to bear fruit by 2026. The SNP might also have sharpened up their act. But if not, or if at least Scottish voters don't see it that way, Reform UK have an opportunity. And you think, well, what then? Well, a writer for the Times has suggested something which might sound implausible to people in Scotland right now, but they do cite recent precedent in Ireland. The suggestion is that the only stable alliance in Scotland after the next elections could well be one with Labour and the SNP working together. Now, to many people outside Scotland, you think, well, that doesn't sound mad at all. Yeah, they're both progressive, leftish parties. One's unionist, one's separatist, and that is, of course, a big deal to both parties. There are some other very real differences as well, but in the face of Reform UK, there are really that many. But the electoral reality is that the SNP and Labour are actually main rivals in Scotland. They are competing for largely the same votes, and in no small part because there is actually a lot in common. But the case cited in Ireland recently was the way Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil worked together out of a shared fear of the rise of Sinn Féin. You know, might Scotland get a dose of the same? And we could remember back to the 2010 to 2015 Westminster coalition between the Conservatives and Lib Dems. Well, they were competing for the same votes as well. And they still made a stable coalition. Admittedly, it didn't do the Lib Dems any good in the end, but, you know, wrong policies. But then there's Wales. Now, the reason why Reform UK could easily do well enough to make a splash in Scotland is because a good chunk of the seats are decided by proportional representation. That not only encourages voters to back smaller parties when on that part of their ballot, because it can still result in wins, but it means that Reform UK's scattergun approach to attracting votes, where they just pick them up wherever they can, little pockets here and there. First past the post, totally useless. It's just a waste. But actually, for those seats that are decided by proportional representation, not such a big problem. Remember that Reform won the third greatest share of the vote comfortably in the general election for the whole of the UK this year, but it's only a very distant joint fifth in terms of the number of seats won. But Wales is going PR for 2026. There'll be no first past the post system at all, which means there's going to be much less wastage of votes. Reform UK can try to attract votes wherever they are able, not really feel like they're being wasted when it comes to dishing out power in Parliament. Reform UK won 17% of the vote in Wales earlier this year. It's much more than in Scotland. And consider that that was using first past the post, where people will have gone to the poll. Okay, maybe some of them sort of thought maybe Reform UK would nick a seat. I think most of them understood that Reform were very unlikely to win any seats in Wales. But 17% of the people who voted in Wales still voted for them. Imagine how they might vote where those votes are going to count and actively put Reform UK MAs into Parliament. The Conservatives only won 18% of the vote by contrast, hardly any more than Reform UK. And they had a chance of winning something. In the end, the Tories did come away empty-handed, but they had a chance. But on the evidence of the Westminster voting, you could certainly see Reform doing better than the Tories. They could have a larger share of the seats, not just the vote, the seats in the Senate after 2026. Unless something changes this current trajectory. And there's any number of things which might. And Farage has said he wants to replace the Tories in both Wales and Scotland. Now, this will be a lot easier in Wales. It's very realistic in Wales, in fact. The Conservatives did do poorly in Scotland this year, in the Westminster elections, but still significantly better than Reform UK. And because most of their seats are still decided by first past the post, the Conservatives are still going to be the default right-wing vote for the pragmatists. But the public will be able to view things very differently in Wales if they understand the new voting system, which I assume most will, where the Parliament promises to be representative of the popular vote. And although the spotlight on Scotland is going to be brighter, and the Scottish Tories are in some disarray compared to their Welsh colleagues, but Farage will stand his best chance of doing really well in Wales. You know, Reform UK, they set up a conference in Wales for just after the US presidential election. Farage went straight from America to Newport in order to focus the momentum of his Orange benefactors win into that Welsh campaign. You know, Reform UK are getting organised. They want to present a narrative of a party on the up and up. So they've won some seats in Westminster, third largest share of the vote. So they've already got that. They're building on that. come 2026, about halfway through this UK Parliament, they're going to be expecting to make big gains. I mean, getting one seat would be a fairly big gain, but, you know, they've got their sights set higher than that. Big gains in both Wales and Scotland. Again, feeds this narrative of on the rise. Oh, yeah, they could be the government at the next election. 2026 is going to be a huge moment for them. It's going to be the moment where they try to convince those pragmatic voters who will think, well, you know, I like Reform UK, but, you know, they're not going to win anything, to actually go, oh, they might win something, I'll vote for them. If things go their way, we're never going to get them off the news. So I would strongly advise against being complacent about this. If you're in Wales or Scotland because you think Reform UK don't really have any appeal there, they do. It might not be as strong, but it's enough for Farage to cause a lot of trouble in your parliament. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.